Yo, yo, here we go. I'm here with Jack Rizzo. I'm RJ Dufresne.
My
This
man.
is Red Pill History, where your history teacher sucks. And we're here to help you out and learn some more history
Absolutely.
that's above and beyond the normal dates and trivial type stuff, which is cool. Trivial stuff's
Yeah.
cool. We're gonna go through a couple of these, but this week we're doing number six, the sixth president of the United States, which is, and talk about trivial. Here we go.
Yeah.
John Quincy with a Z Adams. Okay, now here I'm gonna just get this out there. So all these videos you watch, they all say Quincy, every one of them. So when I was in Massachusetts, I went to the historical site, the Adams Historical Site in Braintree, which is now Quincy.
Right.
And I went through the whole thing and I watched videos, and everybody says Quincy, Quincy. And it's driving me nuts. I'm like, stop saying that. So at the end, I go to this girl, and I'm like, why do they keep saying Quincy? Is that like a New England thing or something? They go, no, that's how you pronounce it. Everybody pronounces it wrong, and it's Quincy. Did you
Wow.
know that?
I did not know that, and I got to tell you, that's the first time that I think it's ever been legitimate when somebody from Massachusetts tells you you're pronouncing something wrong,
Right.
and they're correct. I mean,
Right.
it's got to be the only word in the English language that they could actually say that about, which is probably why they use it a lot. Probably why they changed the town name. Like, this is the only word that we actually say correctly, and nobody else says correctly. We gotta promote this word.
Well, if you know anything about Massachusetts, well, I don't know about Massachusetts, but Boston, let's
Awesome.
say, their towns, none of them sound like they look.
No, no.
So, um, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just one of those things. But
Like I said, there's no Boston accent. It's just 4 million people saying everything in the world wrong.
everything in the world wrong. Yeah. So it's like you see this town called Haverhill. It's not Haverhill. It's Haverhill. No, seriously. And then even worse than that, there's a town called Peabody.
Right.
It's not Peabody. What do you think it would be? It says PEA body. How do you think the
I'm
correct Massachusetts pronunciation is?
Pobo.
Peabody.
What?
Peabody. You have to
That
say Peabody.
that's some backwoods
No,
hillbilly
it's Peabody.
Massachusetts Bimini.
Yeah.
Pibbity pobbity poo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man.
So
Oh
that's your first trivial anomaly, which really, like, I mean, I love history, presidential history, and I was in my 40s when I was up there.
right.
Quincy, it's Quincy.
And I need to correct something before we do anything else. I need to correct something that I said on the last episode that I thought was my trivia for because my thing was I said that the grandsons of Adams were still alive, and it's not. It was Tyler.
Tyler. Yep.
Tyler. His grandsons are still alive, which are only Tyler's what the eighth president, I believe, something like that.
Yeah, he's number 10 because
Number
yeah, number 10. He was the vice president to William Henry Harrison, who died, in 30 days. So
Exactly. So I just want to put that out there. I am not infallible. Anything we say on this show, by the way,
look
we
it
try.
up. Look
Yeah,
it
yeah.
up.
We try our best to be accurate. We are still human beings. We're gonna make mistakes. It doesn't happen very often for me, but I do occasionally make a mistake. I've been married more than once, so I do occasionally make a mistake. Exactly.
But
Oh,
we live in, okay. If when we were kids, way back in the Stone Age,
yes.
what did you have to do to look up stuff?
Well, you had to either go to the library and go to the card catalog. You had to learn the Dewey Decimal
Dewey
System.
Decimal System.
You had an entire class on nothing but this is how you're going to look crap up in the library. Then you had to go to the 1000s or whatever the historical items were, the nonfiction. And then you had to look up John Quincy Adams, and then you had to go to the shelf, and you had to take this little number, and you had to go down the shelf, and you had to find this number. Then you had to actually read the book.
Yeah, but that's suppose it's even there.
Right.
Because some other astute person might check out John Quincy Adams at the same time. Because everybody you were in class with everybody else.
Right.
So
exactly.
somebody else had to go get it.
So my mom, my parents, who were saints, had the forethought to purchase encyclopedias, which encyclopedia is like Wikipedia, but morons can't go in and edit it. It is what it is.
Right.
Unfortunately, the encyclopedia that they had was printed in 1956. I'm not kidding. 1956. So if I wanted to look up, Adams, no problem. They got all kinds of stuff on Adams. If I wanted to look up Kennedy or even Eisenhower, for God's sake, and they have no clue.
No, 1956, you'd be like, who the hell is John F. Kennedy? Just like Back to the Future.
Kennedy would have been a footnote in Joe Kennedy's listing as his son that served as a PT boat commander in World War II. That would have been the entire listing for John Kennedy. Maybe he was a senator then. I don't even think he was a senator in 56.
Yeah, I think he was, but I mean, he would at least been the like in the Massachusetts Senate at some point too. But yeah, so that's two things. You had to go to the library.
Yes.
Rain, snow, it doesn't matter. You probably didn't even get a ride.
Yep.
Or the big long wall size set of Encyclopedia Britannicas.
Yep.
Each book weighed about 10 pounds.
Oh, that's the whole thing, is if you didn't learn this stuff, you could get beaten to death by them.
Right. So like we said, you got YouTube here, kids. YouTube. Look up stuff. Don't just take our words for it. Look it up. Do your research. You can do it at home. You can do it on the toilet. You can do it anywhere you want to do.
One quick editorial comment that has nothing to do with this show, but it's something that happened to me this week. I posted a thing on Facebook. And we all know that everybody that posts everything on Facebook is 100% accurate.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I posted this thing on Facebook, and somebody asked me, and it was a string of facts. I mean, boom, 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 or questions, actually. And somebody asked me to cite sources on it, which I don't mind. I always try to do my research so that I'm not passing on bad information when I can. If it's funny, I'm still going to pass it on because funny is funny whether it's true or not. But I'm sitting here and I'm going through the sources because, I'm like, okay, I'll do sources. And I thought about it. I'm doing exactly what this person should be doing.
Right.
And I'm just spoon feeding them. Don't ever ask somebody for sources. You go and you look up stuff.
If you're interested enough, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So you go try to find your own information and then challenge them. Say, hey, this is what I found. And don't just take the first link that you see. Dig deep. Dig 3, 4, 5 pages into your search and actually find out different opinions on it. Get the correct information and then challenge them. Say, hey, did you know this is what actually is the fact with this? Or I think it is. And see what they say, because they might have information that you don't. But don't just go, oh, sources.
Right. I mean, in a perfect world, that would happen. But what does 95% of the people do?
Either they blindly accept what you say, or they blindly reject what you say, or they just go sources.
Right. Or call you names.
Yeah, or go straight to the name calling. Sources is name calling because it's them saying you're too stupid to know whether or not what you're posting is factual. Right. So. Anyway, that's my little rant. I just had to get that out there because
rants are good. Rants are good. We need rants.
That pissed me off, man. And I'm not going to say who said this because I have to go to like family dinners and stuff.
I gave up on family dinners a long time ago.
You ought to go to family dinners. Your family's in Pittsburgh. I mean, that's God's country.
No, I mean, intermediate family, yes. Brother, parents, daughter. Other than that, done.
Yeah, I can see that.
But Let's get on to number 6 here,
Yeah.
John Quincy Adams, and I find it's more interesting. He's a more interesting person, a more interesting career than I thought. There was probably, in my mind, nobody more qualified
Oh no, he was
to be president.
incredibly qualified. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, he was in the not the cabinet, but he had some part of every administration before him. I think, other than Jefferson. Secretary of State under Monroe,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. He was ambassador to Prussia, Portugal, under the Washington administration. He was 26. Like this, all this guy knew, and he was very successful at it.
Yeah. No, he was
Well,
great.
Um, and of course, what everybody does know is he's the son of our second president, John Adams. So
Yeah.
he's got the upbringing.
Yes.
It's kind of like the presidents we did before, Washington and even Benjamin Harrison. They have, at least the presidents we've done now, has had this background, this pedigree of
Yeah.
becoming somebody. Not every president has that, but these ones are pretty strong. And Adams, obviously, because he's an Adams, um, rose his way to the top pretty successfully.
Yeah. And you could make the argument that that was the he was the last of the what I consider the golden presidents because of that. Because immediately following him was Jackson, who had really no pedigree other than military. I don't and was he's not I'm not a fan of Andrew Jackson. Sorry.
Well, I think Andrew Jackson would be a good subject. It's such an interesting time when we look back at here, and I think so, we need to go back into the context of time and what we're talking about here when John Quincy Adams is president.
Yes.
And I find it very interesting how we go from the 1820 election, which is probably the most boring, uncontested election of all
Oh yeah.
time, which
Oh
James
yeah.
Monroe was unopposed.
Yeah.
He won he was almost unanimously elected,
Hmm.
except one person voted for, believe it or not, John Quincy Adams, because he wanted supposedly he wanted Washington to be the only unanimous
Yeah.
president. So we go from this, and it's called the era of good feelings. We'll get into that when we get to their presidency.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of peace, a lot of prosperity going on. The political parties are kind of in harmony in some ways.
All right.
Um, but then you get to 1824. When you get to this election, I
Yeah.
find it's other than 24 and 28 is probably very. I don't know if it's the most. 28 probably is, but 24. We have 4 people that are running for president, and all of
Yeah.
them are from the same party,
Yes.
technically.
Yes. They're
So
all
you
from
got this,
the Republican Democrats.
yeah. So you got this guy who's John Quincy Adams, obviously, and Andrew Jackson
Yes.
ran. Henry Clay,
Yep.
who's probably one of the bigger statesmen of the time,
Yep.
and this guy called William Crawford, who supposedly is more Jefferson than Jefferson is, from what I understood.
Yeah.
So what's great about this election is that in 1824, Andrew Jackson wins the popular vote and wins the Electoral College, has the most,
Yes.
and he didn't get president.
Did not win the presidency.
Why?
Well, because the way that they elected the president back then was not the way we think of it now. If you controlled delegates, if you controlled electors, that elector, just because you won the electoral college, that elector could change his vote. It was not. It wasn't. If you won the vote, you weren't set in stone to be the president, and it's something that could. I don't think it could happen today.
Well, yeah. I mean, but also what happened is you had to win the majority.
Yes. Yes.
And since there was 4 actually decent candidates, not decent, but quality candidates running for president.
There were 2 good candidates and 2 jackasses. Let's be honest.
But at the same point, there's so that no one won the majority.
Yes.
So back then, it was thrown to the House.
Yep.
The House decided as president. So what you had was a the top three, which was Quincy Adams, Jackson, and this Crawford character.
Yep.
Had to do a runoff and thrown to the House. Now, interesting tidbit. Henry Clay won Kentucky because he was from Kentucky.
Yes.
Okay. John Quincy Adams got 0 votes from Kentucky during the regular election.
Right.
So when the runoff happened, John Quincy Adams, who had 0 votes, won the state.
Won the state, exactly.
Now, that was because...
Huge turmoil.
Right. And Jackson being from Tennessee, being from the West, when the West was... You go from Pittsburgh west, you're in the West. Yeah. Tennessee, Ohio, Kentucky, Jackson owned that. Owned it.
Yep.
But what Jackson called the corrupt bargain, once it got to the House, Henry Clay, who hated Jackson, just could not stand Jackson.
Oh, just bitter enemies.
Adams came to him and said, "You win me the presidency. You give me a couple of these states that you can knock off, especially Kentucky, away from Jackson. I'll make you Secretary of State," which back then was the most important office other than president. The Secretary of State, that was the next step, was becoming president. So when they had the runoff, when it went to the House, it ended up Adams getting 13 states and Jackson only 7.
Yep.
And winning states that Jackson probably should have won. But Henry Clay, nothing really was immoral at the time.
No,
it's just the way politics was.
Right.
But it won Adams the presidency, but it probably lost the presidency the following term.
Yeah, yes. And that was part of what created the actual split between Republicans and Democrats.
Yes.
Yes, because right after that, Jackson essentially forms the Democrat Party, and Adams, he becomes a Republican, and then later on becomes a Whig, and he can't really stay in one party, but that's where that rift actually begins.
Yeah, it is funny because everybody's a Democrat Republican, which Adams was, he had to be a Federalist, but the Federalists were done. They weren't even nobody admitted to being a Federalist back then.
Yes.
So, but in retrospect, he actually is a Federalist, a strong government type president.
Yep. No, absolutely. He was a person who was very. I don't want to say he's the first big government person that held the office, but I think that's how we would color him today, as a big government guy.
Right.
In comparison to everybody who came before him, for sure.
Yeah, and he was very. And when you look into Adams' presidency, he was not a compromiser. So what happened is once Jackson lost the election, he was still in the Senate, I believe. So Adams really had no friends in the Senate. Everything Adams proposed, they were just getting knocked down. And Adams, being as stubborn as he is, he didn't compromise at all. He's sticking to his guns. Even when people like Henry Clay and all his people were like, so Adams wanted, national roads, national university.
Yep.
All these things that in his mind were that should happen, but it's very unpopular at the time. But he wasn't going to back down. So in turn, as far as president goes, he really there's hard to find things he really got done as a president because of his corrupt bargain at the election and his stubbornness.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a person who thinks that the infrastructure of what the federal government does now is important, that was. You can look at that as a big missed opportunity because he could have jump-started infrastructure programs that weren't going to be seen for another 40 or 50 years.
Right.
So, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but that's and also because of that, what could have been one of the greatest presidencies of all time has been colored as a failed presidency. Because a lot of times the historians look at how well does the president work with Congress as being the high point of the presidency,
Yeah.
and they don't look at anything else. So
Right. And there's a place for it, but it's not the end all be all of being a president.
no, not by you don't take an oath to work with Congress.
Right.
I'm
Right.
sorry. It's just it might be important. If you've got something that needs to be done, you need to have your wits about you and be able to flex a little bit and work with the people that are in the Capitol to get something done. But you don't. It's not your job. Your job is not to pass laws. Your job is to protect the Constitution. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
We'll probably get into that a little bit more later on.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what do you think about his proposal to nationalize universities, to make a national university?
Well, before that, all the universities were either religiously based or they were privately backed, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not a fan of a national university. I'm not a fan of the government being in charge of teaching people, because the first thing that the government's going to teach you if they're in charge of teaching people is that government is good. And that is the exact opposite of what this country was based on. This country was based on government bad. The old adage is the government that governs least governs best. So I am happy that that national university did not get passed. Although we essentially have national university now, when you have the federal government running all of the student loan programs, there's only 3 or 4 universities out there that are actually not linked into the government. So we ended up with a national university system without having a national university system be part of the law. So
Right.
yeah, I would have been adamantly against that back in the day, but not enough to side with Jackson.
Right. So Adams, another one of Adams' things was to nationalize roads and canals.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what do you think about that?
That you could make an argument for, because um, it does say in the Constitution that the federal government's there to help essentially regulate interstate commerce. And you could look at a national roads program as not regulating interstate commerce, but assisting it. But still, again, not to me, that's not the purview of the federal government. That if you want to, once you have a national road system, if you want to help states say, hey, you can't charge a tax from going from North Dakota to South Dakota. Sorry, it's going to be open trade. That's regulating trade. That's regulating commerce. Building a national road system, as happy as I am that we have the interstate highways and things like that, that's not the job of the government. And it was going to happen whether people passed it with the government or not. What you would have had was essentially like with the railroads. You would have had car companies go in and they would have built roads and they would have just charged a toll for them.
Right.
You can have your local road, but if you want to get on I-95, you have to pay a $6 toll. And that goes to the Ford company because the Ford company built that road. And if you
Yes.
don't want to use it, you can still get to where you're going to go. It's just you're not going to be as fast.
Can't use
So
it or privatize it, or some private company does it.
right. So the canals, because most canals are not in states, you could kind of say, okay, that's a federal government thing because it's dealing with other countries also. The Panama Canal was not the United States property we were messing with, so you're not going to have Florida come in and say, hey, Panama, we're going to purchase this bit of land from you and build a canal there. You're going to have the federal government come in and say, hey, we want to build a canal. So I'm not as much an opponent of the canal system, uh, but because it benefits the country as a whole. It doesn't benefit just one state or anything like that. But again, it's not in the scope of the federal government. And I know that narrows me down to a very small window of what the federal government's supposed to do, but the Constitution is only 14 pages long. There's a very small window that the federal government's actually supposed to do.
Right. It doesn't take long to read.
No. I mean, seriously, you can read it sitting on the toilet if you want to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've never been, I was always like, well, you can, government's there to, to run the military and protect our freedoms and from enemies, foreign and domestic or whatever. But then I used to go, well, yeah, they should probably build roads too. But the more you think about it, like I'm glad there's the interstate systems here. It makes things a lot easier. But like you said, yeah, it was going to happen regardless.
Right. Whether
there's
the state took it up or
there's a need, it's going to happen. Someone's going to come up with a way to make it happen. It doesn't have to be the government to do it.
You could make the argument we'd have flying cars today if you didn't have the interstates.
Well, you can make a very good argument that the roads would be fixed better if it wasn't run by the government.
I guarantee you the roads would be fixed better because you don't go into a nice housing development and see potholes everywhere.
Right.
You just don't. So, yeah, I am. The older I get, the less I like the interstate. I'm more of a backroads guy.
Oh, yeah. Like when you were young, you were like trying to beat the record of trying to get to one spot to the other, and now it's like I'll get there when I get there. I want to see where this road goes, or this town goes to this town, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. The only time I'm on the interstate if I'm traveling long distance is if I'm driving by myself, and I just don't want to. I want to get to where I'm going as fast as possible. I'm not sitting here conversing with other people or showing them stuff. I just point A to point B. So. But
even then, it's probably some construction.
Oh yeah. So hey, a little personal history lesson. How fast did you get from Raleigh to Chicago one time with our lovely interstate? You remember that?
I can't remember.
Wasn't it like 11 hours or something?
It was something quick. I mean, I got a bunch of records.
I remember we got to where did we go duck pin bowling? Was that Baltimore?
Yeah, it was north of D.C. Yes.
Yeah,
between Baltimore and D.C. Right. Chevy Chase.
Right, and that's a 5.5 to 6 hour trip. It took us 3 hours.
Right. Yeah. We got there pretty quick.
We got everywhere pretty damn quick back in the day.
But
so I'm not going to be a hypocrite and complain that much about the interstate.
No, but that was huge back then because there wasn't not that there was an interstate. There's hardly anything. There was they call them toll roads, but there was national roads. But at the same time, you want to talk about all right. Our roads help us move our military to and fro pretty quick too. Now it was before airplanes or whatever, before that's railroads and all that. So it can be beneficial that way for military purposes as well.
Yes, exactly. And that I was going to bring up that point was that if the states didn't build roads and individuals didn't build roads, the military would have from strategic location to strategic location. So it would have happened anyway. But no, if I was back in those days, I would have been the person who would have stood up like who was it? Davy Crockett stood up in Congress one time and said, I can't see anywhere and they were talking about giving aid to a town that had completely burned down. And they wanted to give like $10,000 from Congress to this town. And he's like, I can't see anywhere in the Constitution where it allows us to take tax money from one person and give to another person just because they had a disaster happen in their life. Right. I'm sorry, that would have been me. And that's, by the way, is why he's my favorite congressman of all time. So.
Yeah, and that's why you're not a congressman right now.
Exactly. That's the only reason. The only reason I'm not a congressman right now.
Yeah.
That and I really piss off a lot of people, so nobody's going to vote for me anyway.
No, you got it's one of Adams' downfalls is this is his way and no other way. There's no compromise, and he had this vision when he came into office that he was going to do this.
Yeah.
And that he was going to waltz into Congress and get this done.
Yep.
But based on how the election happened, he kind of, like I said, he kind of made it hard on himself.
Yeah.
So when you look at Adams as a president, there's really not much to go on because
Oh,
I think he was very successful beforehand as
yeah.
Secretary of State. He wrote the Monroe Doctrine, for
Yep.
God's sakes.
Yep.
He was um, the Treaty of Ghent, which
Hmm.
was the peace treaty to end World War War of 1812.
Yep.
I mean, he was an ambassador for many countries. And then even after his presidency,
Yeah.
obviously, he was the only president to humble himself to go down and be a congressman and go to the House of Representatives, which, by the way, is where he died.
Yes. He died while arguing for a bill.
Right, right. Yeah, he ended up dying I think, a heart attack in the Speaker of the House chambers.
Yep. Exactly.
So this
Exactly.
guy he served. He
Yeah.
served. Now again, you can look at that any way you want. Like he was a career politician. Well, to me that's not a good thing.
No.
He
No.
didn't really do
That was
anything
not.
else but be a politician.
That was not how the founders, how they set up the country to be run. They literally wanted somebody to come in, serve for a couple terms, and then go back to the farm. And that's where you don't want to look at, as much as I like to look at individual states. Now Texas is like that. Texas legislatures, they only meet a couple times a year, and they tried their best not to pass new laws, and that's the way the country was established. The country was established to where new laws should be very, very, very difficult to pass, and
Right.
bad laws should be very, very easy to get rid of. And now it's the exact opposite. The new laws are super easy to get passed, and bad laws are impossible to get rid of.
Right.
So, you know, but
The one thing I did find on there that maybe you can shed some light on about the administration is called the tariff of abominations.
yeah,
If you looked at that at all, which
yeah,
basically there was a 38% tax on 92% of the goods,
yeah,
which really hurt the South. It really hurt everybody, but really hurt the South.
yep. Yeah, the weird thing about this is that it was very punitive towards the South, and Jackson, who was considered a Southern Democrat when he ran as a Democrat, was the president who actually passed it. It didn't get passed by Adams. It was brought up by Adams, but it never got passed during his presidency. It got passed during Jackson. But it was specifically intended to support Northern industry. And it was, I'm not going to say it was a precursor to the Civil War, but it definitely started widening that divide to where you had the North versus the South mindset in every aspect of
Right.
politics.
Yeah, and
Uh,
money and everything. Right.
yes.
And power.
So the biggest problem with it was the South was completely reliant on imports and exports. Especially places like Charleston, their most of their commerce came in through small ports, and when you had tariffs that were draconian get enacted, not only could you not would your import business dry up because you wouldn't have goods going in, but other countries don't just stay static. They retaliate and they don't want to purchase your goods going out. So it
Right.
was a double whammy to the South. They couldn't get anything in and they couldn't sell any of their
So,
goods.
yeah.
So it was I mean, there's a reason it's called the tariff of abominations.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
read about that. I was like, the percentage seemed high. Obviously, it's basically almost all everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It was I think everything but sugar or something like that.
yeah, it said 92% of the goods. I'm sure there's a it goes deeper into the details, but you're more the tariff guy.
Well, and again, I'm not a fan of tariffs. Tariffs have their place short term when you have a nation that's basically taking advantage of us. Where you say, okay, you're going to do this. This is what we're going to do until you change the way you're doing things. That was not the intention of this tariff. The intention of this tariff was we're going to weaken this segment so much that they're going to turn to industry just like they do in the North instead of remaining agrarian. And that didn't happen because the South wasn't built that way. You still had slavery. You still had large segments of land that were nothing but plantations. You can't just flip a switch and all of a sudden you're going to have factories and stuff pop up.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. I don't care how hard you're going to push people. You're just going to punish them, and that ended up what happened was they just basically punished the South for being the South. So
yeah.
Again, didn't help him get reelected. That's for sure.
No, well, yeah. Then you get into the 28 election, which was probably very, other than maybe the election of 1800, very brutal. I mean, talking about Jackson and his infidelity, and which is way bigger than what it is now. And Jackson accused Adams for being using taxpayer money to run a casino in the White House, which Adams had a pool table. So,
I mean,
so he considered that a casino, a gambling hall is what he said.
That's a house of ill repute.
Right. So back then you had your surrogates do all this stuff, but it came to the point where Adams got obliterated. Yeah. Jackson became the 7th president, and then Adams went on to run for Congress and be a very successful one, going into, and he fought very hard for the freedom of slaves way before it was even popular. I mean, it was, he was one of the launching pads of the early speakers against slavery.
Right.
The Missouri Compromise was pretty recent and all this stuff. So this is when states started coming in. Are you a free state? Are you a slave state? I mean, this was big stuff because you had to somehow, whether it's good or bad, had to even that out so you can have the power in Washington.
Yep.
Because if you had too many free states or too little slave states or vice versa, they fought hard to make that as even as they can, and Adams was just one of those people that said they should all be free.
Yeah, he was the first House member who was officially considered an abolitionist, and and he holds a special place in my heart because of that, because that was the lifeblood of the Republican Party in the first 100 years. And equality of people is still the lifeblood of the Republican Party. Right. It's not that we play party politics here, but Republicans tend to not look at different segments of the population and use them against each other, in my opinion. So,
humble opinion.
but the thing is that when we talk about Adams not playing well with Congress or anything, I think he realized very early on that was going to be the case, because he had John C. Calhoun as his vice president. First off, one of my favorite names, probably my favorite name for any vice president ever, John C. Calhoun. That's just a great name. But Calhoun was also somebody who would never compromise with anything. And he was the president of the Senate, so Adams knew he was setting himself up there to where there was going to be contention.
Right.
I think he just said, well, you know what? If they aren't going to play well with me, I'll either beat them into submission, or they're just going to have a fight on their hands every day.
Yeah. So. And the funny thing is, you didn't pick your running mate. So in 1824, Calhoun was the running mate of Adams and Jackson. So it didn't matter who won; he would have been vice president either way. He was one of the early runners of the presidency, and he backed off early and went for the vice presidency. But I actually passed by the John C. Calhoun historical site this weekend in South Carolina. So I didn't stop by, but I you saw the sign. So
wow.
Yeah. I should have.
I love John C. Calhoun, man. I just do. He's one of my favorite figures from history. So
yeah.
I think
David Crockett, right?
Yeah. the thing is with Davy Crockett is that he was the last small government guy standing. So that's why I love him. But no, Calhoun was just ornery.
Well, so was John Quincy Adams. So was a lot of people at this time. Jackson, Henry Clay wasn't that. I mean, he was a. Henry Clay reminds me of John McCain.
Yeah.
He's been there forever, and he's just there. He's a statesman.
Yep. Yeah. Although I think
he runs for president like a million times and never wins. It's just...
That would be Ralph Nader.
Yeah, that's Ralph Nader. Yes.
Oh man.
But a couple other interesting facts I found that it's kind of trivial. John liked to skinny dip.
Yes.
The Potomac.
Yes. Which, you guys need to look at a picture of John Quincy Adams and then imagine him naked.
Yeah.
he's by far, in my opinion, the scariest looking person to ever sit in the Oval Office. I mean, he's like Skeletor had a grandkid or something.
Yeah, Van Buren wasn't that. Lincoln. There's a couple doozies in there.
Yeah.
But there was a story how a lady reporter kept trying to interview the president, John Quincy Adams, and he just kept refusing. So she followed her to the Potomac. Okay, and while he was swimming, took his clothes, sat on them, and said, "You can have these clothes once you give me the interview." So supposedly it's the first female interview of a president ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see, and I could just as easily see him just leave naked and walk back to the White House.
Yeah. If you're gonna skinny dip anyways, you can all right, I'll see you later.
Exactly.
But do you really want to interview John Quincy Adams naked on the beach of the Potomac?
I don't want to do anything John Quincy Adams where John Quincy Adams and the word naked come into play. And I don't want any of that.
But the other thing is, like, when you think of husband and wife couples in presidency, you think of like John and Abigail Adams, just the perfect husband and wife. And come to find out that John Quincy Adams was not a very good father and not a very good husband at all. Like, very standoffish. Supposedly his wife Louisa was started writing plays and how Adams was the bad guy. I mean, it wasn't good as far as the family life.
No,
which is kind of sad because he had someone to look up to. So he went from the best husband and wife couple as a president to probably, one of the worst, I would suppose.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could argue that Lincoln was worse, but not by much, and that was only because his wife was insane, literally.
Yes, and I think Lincoln just kind of put up. I think Lincoln, I don't know if adore is the right word, but I think Lincoln cared.
Yes.
For his wife. I don't think John Quincy gave a crap about his children or his wife.
No. John Quincy Adams cared about three things. And in my opinion, in everything I've ever read about him, he cared about three things in this life. He cared about his church, he cared about the Constitution, and he cared about his service to the American people. Yeah. And outside of that,
that's for sure.
Yeah, everything else could pound sand. He didn't care. So.
And that was pounded into his brain since he was a kid.
Yeah.
As far as service for your country, even his mother said, I would rather you die, be drowned in the bottom of the Atlantic than to embarrass the family and do something immoral. So
Well, I mean, and you have to think about his position where his father was one of the most steadfast and moral men to ever sit in the White House.
Right.
John Adams. People get a weird idea of Adams because he's kind of a portly looking guy, and they're like, oh, he's just this fat guy. And no, John Adams was a patriot, and he was a warrior, and he was the conscience of this country for the first 30 or 40 years, essentially. I mean,
But yeah,
John Adams,
basically, the Declaration of Independence probably would have never happened if it wasn't for John Adams,
right,
because he
exactly,
kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and like, this has to happen, and people kept putting him off and talking about him being stubborn, but thank God he was stubborn,
exactly,
and
exactly.
kept saying no, and kept pushing his agenda forward, and
Yeah,
just trying to move forward into the inevitable.
yeah,
But
and that's the environment that this man grew up in.
right.
So
He
yeah,
knew Washington, he knew Adams, he knew Jefferson, he knew them all. This was the last of the founding. I wouldn't. John Quincy Adams isn't the founding father, but he was one of the last to be involved in the founding.
I think if he had been 5 years older than he would have been one of the founders, right alongside of his father.
Right.
I think that would have just been him. He would have had his signature on the Constitution right there with his dad.
Right. So when you
So
think about it, it's kind of like an interesting transition between Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. These people were in it in the
yeah,
beginning. They knew they not only didn't read about it, they fought, they wrote, they were they were there. And
yep,
now all of a sudden now you have this new generation coming up that wasn't there. They were involved. They could see it, but now there's a transition to these people,
yep,
the Jacksons, the Van Burens, the generals coming up,
mhm,
even Lincoln and some of these lesser known presidents we'll get to. It's just that must have been a very interesting transition going from uh, now not only do America's young, but you're young enough that you have to read about it and try to understand what happened a generation before. You weren't
yeah,
in it.
yeah, exactly. That had
This
to
is
be
right where
terrifying.
it happened too.
Yeah, that had to be terrifying to the
Yeah.
people. Maybe not the average citizen, because back then the federal government was so unobtrusive until you had things like the tariff of abominations happen. The federal government was so unobtrusive that they didn't really care who was in charge as long as everything was going good.
Right.
Um, but but for the people involved in the seats of power, in the governorships, things like that, that had to be a terrifying time for them, because if you've ever experienced a company being handed off from the originator of the company, the founder of it, to maybe his son or his grandson who had no hand in the founding of it, the majority of the time it doesn't work well. It gets botched. They try to do, and you can kind of see that's a little bit of what happened was people tried to put their own mark on it and take it in a different direction than what it was originally intended.
Yeah,
So
so you had a long period of time where it's just um, one-term presidents, in, out, in, out, in, out. There was really no stability going on. You had Jackson, and I think after Jackson, the next actual full eight years was Grant.
yep, yeah, I believe so. I believe so.
And from so that's a long time.
Hmm.
And then I think after Grant, you're looking at uh, I don't know if you can consider Woodrow Wilson actually mentally there for 8 years, but
No, I don't.
there was a big period of time where you just didn't have an 8-year president,
No,
and it
no,
was probably growing pains.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was everybody seeing this as an opportunity. Most people, I won't say everybody, most people have seen this is my opportunity to steer this, for good or bad, in the direction that I want.
Right.
And like you had with Adams, his mindset was, we should have a national university, we should have a national road system, we should build up the infrastructure, and we should set ourselves up for success for the next 100 years. But again, our country wasn't built that way, and you still had people in Congress that knew that wasn't how this country was supposed to operate, so they fought against it. Um, but he wasn't the first one, but he was the first one to really have a mindset of, okay, I can see where this is going to go. I'm going to try to steer it in this direction. He
Yeah.
just he just was not very good at it.
No. So it's kind of like, unfortunately, what most presidents go through. They're good at everything they do, and then the presidency is just, you're under the microscope, so it's very hard to be a very good president, and yet
Yeah.
he was great at just about everything else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where would you rank Quincy?
So
No numbers, just hey, I'd see him right around here as far as being a constitutionalist president.
well, here's the thing: he's one of the guys that I've always had a hard time kind of pegging, because again, I think his heart was right. I think that if you look at quotes from Adams about the Constitution, he had the right mindset. He revered the Constitution, but his actions didn't follow what his mindset was. So I'll put a number on it, and I've actually changed my number. I originally had him at number 18 with constitutional, and I actually made him a little better with 15 simply because most of his stuff didn't get passed, and because he, as an abolitionist, realized that the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution needs to cover all people living in the United States. So I think that there he had his head straight, and I think that if he had gotten some of his stuff done, it would have been really great for this country. But most of it was just not the way we should be running things. So
Right.
I have him pretty much right in the middle, but I have him the upper part of the middle. If you want to say the top of the middle third, so like I said, like 15, maybe 16, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd personally probably have a little lower than that. I mean, like in the 20s maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The having everything. I think he saw the future.
Yes.
He was a little bit before his time, but he wanted to nationalize so much stuff.
Yes.
And have government involved a little too much for my liking.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. He understood the Constitution. He understood a lot. He spoke 8 languages or something like that.
He was a genius. He was a legitimate genius.
Yeah, it was probably presidency was probably beneath him, to be honest with you. It was just he was better at other things. And as far as being a president goes, I don't think he, as constitutionally, he just didn't get anything done, which was sometimes is good, sometimes is good, but some of these nationalizing this and nationalizing that, it kind of is like, wow. I mean, yeah, I don't know. He's hard to peg. He's hard to peg, and he's supposed to be a great speaker,
right?
Like a great speaker, but he just rubbed people the wrong way sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's where and I could be argued to your point. I could be convinced that he's down in the 20s for that exact reason, because his ideas were not constitutional. As much as he thought they were, they weren't. But these people who clamor for, we got to get the senators and representatives back in Washington so they can do the work of the American people. No, keep them out of Washington.
Right.
I don't want them doing anything.
Yeah, they don't need to make new laws because they're bored, which is basically what they do. They want to put their name out there. I'm creating a dent in the universe. No, just stay home until you're ready.
So I think that his not being able to get anything done constitutionally saved his presidency. I think if he would have gotten the stuff he wanted done, he would have been the first incarnation of Wilson, essentially. Except for not a racist freak.
But at the same time, he was ahead of his time as far as abolitionism and the freedom of the slave. Even he knew. I'm pretty sure he knew that that wasn't going to happen in his lifetime. There was so much that had to happen and go on, and bridges to be burned. And probably at that time they knew Civil War was going to happen at some point. Maybe not at the extreme it did, but you can only kick the can down the road enough before it explodes.
I think the best job for him potentially would have been Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He
You know,
strikes
Howard Taft.
yeah, is that kind of person who had the right mindset, who saw the Constitution in its full glory all at once and didn't segment it out. So and that's why he was an abolitionist. He was a moral man, and he believed that the Constitution and this country were only fit for moral men to adhere to it. You
Right.
couldn't take the Constitution and give it to an immoral nation. Let's say you couldn't give it to Iraq, and have it work, because you're going to have human beings in there who are messing around with it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was trying to do things that were not constitutional. So
Yeah.
thank God for what do they call it when they can't get anything done? Oh, what is it? It's not roadblocks. What is it? The word has slipped my mind here.
It's gridlock.
Gridlock. Thank you.
Gridlock.
Thank God for gridlock. I can't believe I couldn't remember that word. So
yeah. Gridlock. So yeah, we got the bag here.
Oh, we got the bag. Beautiful. Beautiful.
To do our next random.
While you're doing, I'm gonna look at my notes to see if there's anything we missed.
Yeah. Throw in something out there that you didn't. I think I got all mine done. The skinny dipping and.
Yeah. One thing I did want to mention was there used to be a thing called a gag rule that meant that you could stop debate on a topic simply because it might upset other people. And he actually led for repeal of the gag rule because that was what was stopping the debate on abolition, because people in Congress were afraid that the southern states were going to get so mad they would revolt and just leave the houses of Congress. And Adams actually led for the repeal of that, which is why you can now have open debate in the halls of Congress, supposedly on anything, because there shouldn't be anything where they say, because freedom of speech applies everywhere, including and especially in the halls of Congress.
Right.
If you're going to have freedom of speech, if you think that we should abolish slavery, you should be free to speak on it and not worry about, is this going to piss somebody else off? Because part of the reason that you're wanting to talk about it is it's going to piss somebody else off.
Right, and it gets stuff done.
Exactly.
You gotta move. You gotta get the blood going eventually.
But I didn't want us to get out of here without mentioning that, because that was, and again, that was when he was. I can't remember if that was when he was president or when he was actually a member of Congress. I think it was when he was a member of Congress.
Yeah, I think so too, because I didn't see that in the presidential stuff.
Right.
Which, to be honest, it was kind of hard to find. I mean, anything that he did, it was such a, like you said, gridlock. It was the president, and then the House, the Congress, there's no budging.
Well, and again, his presidency, the impact of his presidency wasn't so much what happened during it; it was what it set up to happen during the next presidency, which the office was held by one of the more loathsome creatures to ever hold the office, in my opinion.
I can't wait to do Jackson. I don't see him as a great guy, but I don't see him as you're talking to him like he's a Wilson or something.
No, well, he's. You'll find out. He's not one of my favorite folks, that's for sure.
Right. But the one thing I do know about Jackson is that when he left office, we actually had a surplus.
Yes, we did.
Had savings.
Yeah.
He tried to get rid of the bank.
Well, yeah.
I'm all for.
Yeah, well, and back then, Democrats, because they were very regional, they didn't spend a whole lot of money federally. The states did. The states didn't have surpluses.
Right.
But the federal government did, because a lot of the money for the federal government was used up north, and they didn't care anything about doing anything up north. So you ended up with surpluses. So, but we'll get into that one.
No, I mean.
Hold me up at number 7. Come on.
Yeah, well, let's see if we get to like 19th century here or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not the 19th century, the 20th century. We are in the 19th century.
Jimmy Carter.
1900s.
Jimmy,
all right, here we go. This is like my most nervous part of the day, of the broadcast.
I've been looking forward to this all day.
Here we go. What we got here? We got one. All right, here we go. '28.
28.
Who is 28? And I know who it is. Oh my God, I know who it is. I think I know who it is. Yeah.
28 would be. Is that Hoover?
You're a little bit past.
I know it's not. It's not Roosevelt for sure.
If 30 was Coolidge and he
Oh,
became president because of Warren G. Harding and he was
yeah.
20, he was
29.
29. So who was before Warren G. Harding? Oh,
Oh my God. That wasn't Wilson, was it?
Woodrow Wilson.
I thought Wilson was 27.
I hate that guy. Let's check it.
Oh,
Let's check it
yeah.
real
Check
quick.
that because we might have to do a
I'm
double.
pretty sure Coolidge was 30.
I think you're right. I think Coolidge was 30.
I'll type in the 28th
Oh,
president. Thomas Woodrow Wilson.
oh my God.
This might be a long one here.
Wow.
We were just talking about him.
Wow.
Well, this is what this show is about. Is
Yeah. No.
taking presidents who are either too high and
Yeah.
should be brought down a notch, or too low and should be brought and we'll just get out and say it. Wilson's too high on most people's notes.
Wilson needs to be kneecapped twice. He is generally put in the top, if not top, definitely top 10, but usually the top 5
Yeah.
of all time by historians. Now, most of these historians are exactly like Wilson was. They're university people. They're professors, and all they care about is the progressive element of politics these days.
Because Woodrow Wilson was the president of Princeton University.
Yes, exactly.
So he is academia.
Yeah, they're going to hold him to this super high. They're not going to hold him to a high standard. They're going the exact opposite. Everything he does, every time he takes a poop, it's going to be gold, and it's going to smell like lilacs and daisies.
Yes, and the other thing is he was also president during a war, which always gets people an extra bump, whether it's regarded or not.
Yeah.
The Roosevelts, the Lincolns, the Washingtons, they all get another extra edge because of major wars.
Yep.
So, and this is going to be it's going to be a doozy.
Wow.
My mind's already going. We can start the show now.
We can start right now. Right now.
All right,
I don't need notes.
So before we go, we pick a president. Pick one thing about Woodrow Wilson that you can think of right now.
Woodrow Wilson was the first president, I believe, to have a motion picture played in the White House. And I think, and I know that he had a motion picture played in it because he had a KKK movie played in the White House. There's all kinds of little nasty things about Wilson, but that's the one thing that I could look at and I could say, yeah, this is like a happy moment, except for it wasn't. It could have been freaking a Charlie Chaplin film. No, it was, I think it was Birth of a Nation.
Yes, I think it was.
Which was a KKK promotional film. Right. It was propaganda before propaganda really existed. And he had it played in the White House.
Yeah.
By Edison, I believe.
Probably.
So, yeah.
Well, the one thing I could think of is if you could think of a first lady who was against women's suffrage, which happened right about this time, gave the women the right to vote.
Yeah.
Edith Wilson did not want to give women the right to vote. She was against it.
Really? Really?
Who probably was the first female president anyways. Because Woodrow Wilson basically done for the last year of his presidency. It's going to be so much fun. I love it. I love it.
She was the precursor to Eleanor Roosevelt.
Eleanor Roosevelt and Hillary, as far as being active.
Yeah.
overly active first ladies. I think she was probably the first. Probably the first.
Yeah.
Going too much.
Before that,
She wouldn't let the vice president see the president.
yeah. Wow. What a dirtbag.
And tried to get him to run again.
Oh,
The dude
God.
was a drooling vegetable, and he was.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Oh, so much fun. Again, guys, look this stuff up.
Yeah.
Because you think we're biased or whatever, look this stuff up, and you will be surprised.
Spoiler alert: I am biased on this one. I ain't afraid to admit I am biased on this.
I am biased, and this will be a good one. This will be a very good one. So,
yeah.
Anyways, take us out, man.
Yeah, man. Well, again, it's going to be a contentious episode next week, so you guys be sure to join us. If you're watching this on YouTube or iTunes or whatever platform you're watching us on, give us a rating and a review. It doesn't have to be anything lengthy or anything that just give us 5 stars and say, oh, this is super, pretty much whatever, something like that.
I'm not gonna read your comments anyways, guys. So.
Exactly.
Comment anyways, but I won't read them.
Oh, please comment so that we can at least feel like we're ignoring something that's out there. I don't want to.
Like it. Give it a thumbs up.
But yeah, definitely give us a like and subscribe. That way, when our next episode comes out, you get the first alert for it. So, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. For RJ Dufresne, I'm Jack Rizzo. You guys, thanks for joining us this time, and join us next time for Red Pill History, because your history teacher sucked. Thanks, guys. Awesome.